Okay, so this is Jeremiah 8. Remember that they're changing my voice. At that time, declares the Lord, the bones of the kings and officials of Judah, the bones of the priests and prophets, and the bones of the people of Jerusalem will be removed from their graves. They will be exposed to the sun and the moon and all the stars of the heavens, which they have loved and served, and which they have followed and consulted and worshipped. They will not be gathered up or buried, but they will be like dung lying on the ground. So their bones represents like a part of them. Say, the word of God is in my heart, it's in my bones, right? And it's in that sort of way that their bones are connected to their spirit. So it's being used that way in Jeremiah, right? The word is in my heart, it's in my bones, right? So their heart, their spirit, their bones, okay, are going to be exposed to the sun and the moon and all the stars of the heavens, which they have loved and served, which they have followed and consulted and worshipped, right? So they served, right? They loved, they got married in those spirits. They will not be gathered up or buried, but they will be like dung lying on the ground. Now, I'm sure you can all agree that this interpretation is valid. You might argue there's more to it, but this is the essence of it. Everything else is like peanuts. It doesn't really matter, okay? So what's going to happen is that they're going to be destroyed by the ideas that the sun and the moon and the stars represent, okay? So the moon in Revelation doesn't represent God's natural creation. It represents the moon temples and what they perceive it to be, okay? So just like the figs, right? Sometimes used to symbolize good. Sometimes it's used to symbolize evil. It's like silver and gold, right? The silver and gold of the wicked is worthless. But silver and gold can also refer to the wisdom and insight of the righteous. Okay, so that's a little bit confusing. That's part of why I always clarify this, to remind you this is a key part of it. You need to get used to the idea that this is the formula that they're using. Okay. Whenever I banish them, all the survivors of this evil nation will prefer death to life, declares the Lord Almighty. So they prefer being ballless. Now, if you're really a righteous warrior, that's part of why it's the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. Because if you don't see yourself like that, you don't get what's going on. You simply don't. If you're a scribe outside the divine order, you're like dung on the ground too. You can mean well with all your heart, but if you're not in the divine order, you don't appreciate what God's mighty spirit is, right? Hebrew is an Afro-Asiatic language, and before the Jews existed, there was Africans, right? This is an African story that the Jews sort of hijacked and then don't include the Cushites in writing the story. You need to understand that, okay? You think the only people who were trying to be good were Jews, okay? There was also other peoples. However, the people who were truly good, okay, was the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. Okay, Jeremiah hands didn't gather up the wind. It says, whose hands have gathered up the wind? Okay, this is a story to the Jews in the Egyptian tradition of using their traditions and their way of thinking. We also see that in Christianity and popular culture with Christmas, right? They assimilate Christmas to explain to the pagans, their religion. And so it was with the Jews, right? It's a Cushite religion, right? Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod, Nimrod founded the Babylon when it was great. And God was talking to Nimrod. He was not talking to anyone else there, okay? So this is an African tradition, like Noah has something to do with African DNA, right? Ham, Shem, and Japheth, these are human/African expressions, not European expressions. This is not something that happens when the white man comes back to Africa. This was something that happened in Africa already when Africans were black. Okay, and they spread out and then they start changing form. Okay, so Ham, Shem, and Japheth are black African gene expressions and spirits. Okay, and then through Nimrod is the one that conquers, right? And then the Jews start telling it their way, and Africans start telling it their way, and everyone starts telling it their way, and the Jews' way proves to be wrong, but they're pointing to the way out of their system. The kingdom of heaven is taken away from you and your explanation and your system, and is given to a people that is actually doing the fruit of God, which is the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. If you don't understand them right, my goodness, look, if you don't agree with what I just said, zoom in on, you know them by their fruit. Okay, who's actually moral right now and who's just riding the corporate wave, and what peoples are leading the charge to make sure that everyone rides the corporate wave.